Hello and welcome to the 2020 NATS virtual conference poster sessions. This is phase one, where you will get to hear all of our poster presenters give a 5-minute talk on their poster research. We've got a great lineup of cutting edge and up and coming and really exciting projects that have been done throughout the last years that are really an exceptional contribution to the conference. And now we need your help. We would like to put out a call for questions so that for phase two of the poster sessions, we could do a live Q&A that we'll record prior to the conference and drop each day of the conference. And so we are asking you, NATS membership, that if you have a question regarding any of these posters, if you would send it to me, Dr. Nicholas Perna, at nkperna@mc.edu, I will take those questions and ask them of our poster presenters during our Q&A session. I would like to have those questions by Friday, June the 12th. So we're excited. We're excited to have this opportunity to share this research with you guys. Please, if you have a chance, check out all 3 poster sessions. If you have a few questions that you'd like to ask the authors, send them to me, and I will get them out to everyone in the session. Thank you so much for your time and your efforts. I look forward to seeing everyone at the virtual conference later in June.
My name is Julia Austenfeld. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I will be talking about acoustic registration for transgender singers on testosterone. One of the topics acoustic registration deals with is the vowel modification that all singers engage to adjust color and resonance throughout their range. You may know these vowel modifications as cover, or simply as the strategies you and your singers use to navigate the passaggio. These strategies differ in predictable ways between voice types, and can be studied in Voce Vista primarily by examining the first 2 formants of the vowel. Testosterone therapy is a gender-affirming medical process pursued by many transmasculine individuals, including non-binary people and trans men. It is known to thicken the vocal fold mass, lowering pitch. For the purposes of this presentation, transgender is an umbrella term for all people who are not cisgender, i.e. do not fully identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. My research study surveyed 11 singers ages 24 to 31 with varying experience levels from amateur to professional. I collected voice range profiles as well as formant profiles on the vowels A, E, I, O, and U. 5 of my subjects were transgender and have pursued testosterone therapy, 3 were transgender and have not pursued any hormone therapy, and 4 were cisgender. Nearly half the participants were non-binary or genderqueer. As you can see from these 2 charts, not all transgender singers pursued testosterone therapy or identified as male, so I developed 3 categories for dividing up the subjects. The first category is singers who experienced testosterone-dominant teenage puberty and no subsequent hormone therapy, all of whom were tenors and baritones. The second category is singers who experienced estrogen-dominant teenage puberty but pursued testosterone therapy as adults, commonly known as trans singers on T. The third category is singers who experienced estrogen-dominant teenage puberty and no subsequent hormone therapy, all of whom were sopranos or mezzo-sopranos. All singers who had pursued testosterone therapy as adults experienced a drop in their lowest pitch, some phonating as low as A-flat 2. Almost all were also able to access their head voice successfully. In fact, one 26-year-old professional singer had a functional range of A-flat 2 to E-flat 5. However, there was no difference in the vowel formants between the groups of singers who had experienced estrogen-dominant teenage puberty, regardless of testosterone influence as adults. As you can see, the first formant of the A vowel is similar between singers who had taken testosterone and those who had not, suggesting that testosterone therapy does not impact vowel formants. In addition, here you can see 2 examples of the influence of testosterone in teenage puberty on the vowel formants. On both A and O, the first form differs significantly between those who experienced a testosterone voice change as teenagers versus those who did not. This difference was significant on A, E, and O. This confirms that although testosterone therapy as an adult results in access to lower pitches, it does not appear to change the size or shape of the vocal tract or otherwise impact the vowel formants. The knowledge gathered in this study can be used in the voice studio in two key ways. One, some singers may wish to develop the passaggio from chest into head voice and continue using their head voice while on testosterone, and in many cases this is possible. You can use the same strategies for navigating this passaggio that you would for any adult soprano or mezzo voice, with the understanding that phonation quality in head voice will likely be rougher and much more prone to dysphonia, especially within the first year on testosterone. Two, baritones and tenors on testosterone will require different approaches to turn over in chest voice. Whether in CCM or classical, the points of turning, or pitches on which vowel modifications happen, will not be the same as they would be in a young baritone or tenor voice following teenage puberty. They will likely sit a few half steps higher. This means transgender singers on testosterone have different timbral options in the passaggio than you might expect. They may be able to execute pitch-vowel combinations that are not characteristic of the tenor and baritone voices we know. For some singers, this may be a desirable feature, while others may want to pursue resonance strategies that help their voices sound more like their cisgender peers. In conclusion, I encourage you to embrace the possibility that transgender singers on testosterone are capable of unique timbres and extended ranges that will be best served by a flexible approach to training the passaggio, and to understand that vowel modification and points of turning follow unique but predictable patterns in the transmasculine voice that you can use to help your students achieve their goals.
Oi, meu nome é Laura Chipe. Hi, my name is Laura Chipe, and this is my colleague, Margarete Miguel. Today we are here to speak to you about Alberto Nepomuceno, the Brazilian composer and father of art song in the Portuguese language, whose work will be featured in a forthcoming 2020 anthology and performance guide of 20 of his art songs. This anthology will commemorate the centennial of his death. Alberto Nepomuceno led his Brazilian compatriots to courageously write what you know. This was the admonition of his mentor, Edvard Grieg. Nepomuceno's highly acclaimed protege, Heitor Villa-Lobos, declared, "Without Nepomuceno, I would not have written my songs." Nepomuceno was a disruptor. In the late Romantic period, the European model for musical composition was considered the ideal in Brazil. Alberto Nepomuceno's desire to compose using Portuguese texts and his support of the abolition of slavery brought him into conflict with the musical and political establishment of his time.
In his romantic compositions, Nepomuceno championed the use of Brazilian folk melodies, rhythms, and dance forms in addition to the Portuguese language. His choices were unusual for their time, as he included texts written by female poets and poets of color, whose working during this period was often ignored.
This forthcoming anthology explores Nepomuceno's life and work. It is our hope that such an important innovator may find more honor at home and abroad as a result of this research. Under Margarete's guidance, I have created comparative studies of each text, providing deeper understanding and facilitating more than just pronunciation mastery, creating a partnership between diction and interpretation.
I have translated Laura's summaries and research into Portuguese. It was during the 2005 Brazilian Vocal Encounter, where prominent voice scholars, linguists, musicologists, and artists conferred to create a modern edition of phonetics for Brazilian Portuguese. This facet of the scholarship is highly important in making Nepomuceno's genius available to artists of all over the world.
We believe Nepomuceno's literature worthy of serious study in the modern vocal studio because it offers accessible literature to early vocal studies and soaring melodies with exotic rhythms.
The Portuguese language is not any more challenging to sing than others. The proposed anthology, along with in-person masterclasses, as well as recorded pronunciation guides, will expertly shepherd those new to Nepomuceno's exhilarating work.
As we mentioned, Nepomuceno was an abolitionist. This was a radical stance for the times. His out-of-the-box thinking not only radically changed the musical landscape, but also ushered in cultural reforms.
Though not a POC, person of color, he was from an oppressed people, the Jews of the Madeira Islands. His personal experience formed his behavior toward his fellow Brazilians of all creeds, all colors, and called him to demand equality.
Yes, he knew opposition, yet he composed.
Yes, he knew prejudice, yet he stood against oppression.
Yes, he knew sorrow and challenge, yet he celebrated diversity.
Hi everyone, my name is Logan Contreras and I am the creator of the Cassia database. The database is a collection of art song by women and non-binary composers with the intended purpose of assisting voice teachers, singers, pianists, coaches, and beyond in discovering appropriate repertoire by women composers at any range of study or career. The database is currently sitting around 1,700 songs by over 80 different composers, ranging from the Baroque through the 21st century. The songs are categorized by level, voice type, language, composer, and composer dates, and also includes information such as range, tessitura, piano accompaniment, vocal line, and where you can find scores. Along with being a resource towards finding rep, the database celebrates, recognizes, advocates, and works towards representing the compositions by all of these amazing and hardworking composers that are often neglected inside the voice studio. The database is also partnered with the Institute for Composer Diversity, and we're all strong advocates for creating inclusivity with our repertoire choices. So within this presentation, I'm going to take you through a quick little introduction of the website and show you some of the features that you might find useful. All right, so from the home page, there are two different options to access the database. The first one is down here. You can click to the base, or you can go up to the top. And from here, you'll see two different options. So the first one we're going to look at is the Google Sheet. So this is for someone who's looking a little bit more broadly. If there's not something you're looking for too specifically, this might be where you want to go. This will show you all the contents of the database in one place. And if we go back, the other option is to actually search the database. So this is where you can limit your criteria a tiny bit more. So let's say you're looking for a song for a medium voice student who's at an intermediate level. And let's say you want something in French. Click search, and this will show you all the songs that fit that criteria within the database. If you want to look a little bit more closely at one of the songs, all you have to do is hover on View Details and open that up. And this will show you everything a little bit more closely. So this is where you can see information like the range, tessitura, the information on the accompaniment line, the voice, and then where you can find that score. And then all you have to do to find more is go back, search again, and do it all over again. Some other resources that might be useful at the very top, we have the Developing Singer tab. And this is for teachers who are working with late high school, possibly a collegiate level student, someone who maybe hasn't been studying for too long. So you don't want to assign them something too complicated. You can search by low voice, medium, or high. And inside of here, you'll have some specific songs that I think might be really good for this type of student. So you'll see information on the range and tessitura, as well as what the piano accompaniment looks like, and some other information on either the vocal line or the song itself. And then, of course, where you can find the score. Each of these will have options in French, Italian, German, and English. If you're looking for another voice type, say you need the medium or low, all you have to do is click at the top, and then this will take you to the options for those voice types. At the top again, let's go to resources this time. So this will take you to other incredible places, such as other databases, places to research or learn about some of these women composers, or places to actually find the music. So all these wonderful publishers who help to get this music out. So this page is going to be really good if you're looking to broaden horizons just a tiny bit more. The listen option is going to be great if you're looking to maybe explore some new composers through listening to their music. So we have some featured composers such as Judith Shatton, Juliana Hall, and Rianne Samuel. And then at the very bottom, you'll see Cassia playlists. So we have a bunch of different playlists on YouTube as well as Spotify. So if you're looking to listen a little bit more, this will be the place to go. You can also submit your performances here to be included either on social media accounts or on the website. And most recently, I have a submission option. So if you're a composer or you have performed a song that's not in the database yet, you can help me to get it up there faster by filling one of these out. So fill out as much as you possibly can. I will fill out the rest and submit it to me, and I will include it in the database. Lastly, if you have any questions or anything for me, go ahead and click on that contact, shoot me an email, or submit your video and audio submissions. I hope this is a useful tool for you all, and I look forward to hearing how this can grow to help you even more. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, welcome to my practice room. I'm Dorea Cook, and I will be talking with you today about 21st century North American art songs by women composers for the young singer. I started exploring this topic a couple of years ago out of sheer frustration. I had some beginning and some intermediate level students who wanted to sing music that was new, that no one else was singing, music that was cross-genre, written by women composers. And I looked on my music shelf and I saw music mostly by male composers or by women composers, but that was far too difficult for my younger students. So I started hunting, and I am thrilled to share with you some of my research today. These songs are accessible, modern songs for the young singer, let's say age 16 to 20, but they are enjoyable for any age and skill level. The easiest of these songs can be sung by a middle schooler or a high schooler with some vocal training. The harder of these songs demand more musicianship and a higher level of vocal technique. I'm happy to say I've found a lot of songs. Some songs are self-published, others are published by both smaller and larger publishing companies. Of course, Schirmer and Hal Leonard, but also Classical Vocal Reprints, Graphite Publishing, and many more. Some of the other songs are unpublished. I have been greatly helped in my research by many people, but most of all by these many, many women composers who have shown me kindness and generosity by sending me both published and unpublished songs to peruse, lecture about, and perform, because I'm a singer and that's what I love to do. So thank you so much. So what makes these songs accessible? More specifically, for the average young singer, what does music have to do or not to do? Here are 6 very general comments on my rubric and on the songs I've collected. First of all, these songs are tonal, or at least semitonal. If they are not, the piano usually helps out by doubling the vocal line. These songs have limited rhythmic challenges, as rhythmic complexity is one of those things I've found that my young singers struggle with the most. If there are complicated rhythmic patterns, meter changes, etc., there are things such as the melodic line that are often easier. Speaking of the melodic line, it usually has regular phrasing, and most of these songs are mid-range with limited extremes. I'm a mezzo, so I love it. The piano collaboration supports the vocal line melodically, harmonically, and/or rhythmically. This piano collaboration is also one of the other things that I've found that either define a song as doable or too hard for the young singer. These songs have relevant poetry and subject matter. It doesn't mean that they shy away from difficult subjects, but what it does mean, if you want a huge oversimplification, that there is more Emily Dickinson and less James Joyce. Lastly, the genre and style in these songs are clearly communicated. Students understand whether to sing legit or whether to mix or belt, whether they improv or whether they need to sing as written on the page. A lot of these songs are what I would term cross-genre, where they fuse the traditional classical art song with popular musical idioms such as musical theater, jazz, cabaret, blues, country, and more. It's very cool. I'm going to do some screen sharing now and share with you a very non-exhaustive list of composers growing by the day. You will see here some composers I'm sure that you know and love. There are also some composers here that maybe you've never heard of. Their websites are here. Please check them out. They are fantastic. The other PDF I'd like to share with you is a very small selection of some specific songs and composers that I would recommend you look at first. Again, you'll see here some composers that you know, maybe some others that you've never explored before. Both of these PDFs are on my website, www.dorea.cook.com. You can also email me at dorea.cook@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and happy singing!
Hi, my name is Dr. Catherine Gardner, and I'm a soprano teacher and researcher at East Carolina University in North Carolina. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I began to look for information about how my pregnancy might impact my singing, not only physically, but also emotionally, career-wise, and my sense of self as a performer. I found out very quickly, however, that this subject is under-researched, especially the elements of emotional and social impacts. And so I decided to focus my dissertation on the experience of pregnancy for the classical singer. I ended up surveying 444 women from around the world, and I also conducted in-depth interviews with pregnant classical singers. So today I'd like to share some of my findings with you. I asked my survey participants several questions about a wide range of physical impacts, but what I'm sharing today is what women said about breathing, singing, and pregnancy. Not surprisingly, changes in function of breath and support was a common experience among the women I surveyed, especially as they got to the third trimester. So 87% of women noticed difficulty sustaining long phrases. 84% found coloratura passages more challenging than pre-pregnancy, and 93% of women surveyed had difficulty achieving depth in inhalation during the third trimester. On the positive side, however, 75% of women felt that they gained a deeper understanding of appoggio while pregnant. One woman shared, "I learned how to breathe from being pregnant. It changed my concept of breath control." Having to navigate around a growing fetus actually provided the women I studied with more technical tools to sing successfully, even after pregnancy. One woman wrote, "I still use the feelings and awareness I gained during pregnancy in my singing today." The emotional impact of pregnancy for the classical singer has not been explored, and yet as singers we know that our emotions are integral to a successful performance. We also know that pregnancy is a time of increased emotional changes, both hormonally and also because of the major life changes that occur with a new baby. 70% of the women I surveyed found that the emotional changes they experienced during pregnancy not only affected their daily lives, but also impacted their interpretation and emotional connection to the repertoire they performed. 71% of the women I studied also experienced a reordering of priorities, which impacted their performing. 50% of them shared that pregnancy improved their attitude towards rejection and competition. One woman wrote, "Regardless of how it impacted my technique, becoming pregnant gave me something else that I cared even more deeply about. Suddenly rejection or knowing I hadn't sung my best in an audition didn't matter nearly as much as it had before becoming pregnant." 42% of women felt that their performance anxiety improved during pregnancy. So these are just a few examples which show that the emotional impact of pregnancy on the classical singer is significant and deserves further study. So I was also curious about how pregnancy would impact the careers of the women I studied. So first of all, I asked women whether they felt supported in their wish to continue singing while pregnant, if they did. And happily, 87% felt fully supported by their partner. However, for those who had agents, only 14% felt supported by their agent. One woman shared, "My agent did not want to tell people I was pregnant. In the end, her fears were founded as I was asked to step out of a role." 68% of women surveyed felt that pregnancy had a positive impact on their singing. In other words, they felt that the experience of pregnancy made them better singers. But when I asked about how pregnancy impacted their careers, only 27% of women surveyed felt that pregnancy positively impacted their careers. That's a huge discrepancy. So there's so much more to discuss here, and I'm hoping that this presentation can just be the beginning of a bigger discussion we can all have regarding classical singers and pregnancy. If you're interested in my work, please check out my website, singingfor2.com. And if you are a performing mom, please go to my website and fill out my newest survey, which involves classical singers juggling motherhood and the demands of performing. Thanks so much for listening.
Most people hear that recording or recordings like it for the first time and are usually a little bit shocked. Perhaps it's the timbre of historical singers, or the use of chest voice by soprano and mezzo-soprano singers, or maybe they hear differences in vibrato or performance practice. Regardless, there's a sense in our profession that the majority of the differences between historical singers and their modern-day counterparts that we hear or perceive are purely the result of the limitations in historical audio recording technology. So I'd like to ask us all to consider this question. How does historical audio recording technology impact our perception of these historical singers? My goal with this study was and is to understand how the oldest form of mass-produced audio recording technology, namely wax cylinders, filters or otherwise distorts recorded audio signals, and more specifically, the voice output signal. Now, 5 minutes is not a lot of time to go into great detail about this project, so if you take your phone and scan this QR code with your camera, you will be directed to some interactive content that will teach you a little bit more about wax cylinders, their history, objective limitations, and it will even allow you to listen to some recordings of modern-day singers recorded on both wax cylinders and microphones. Let's try to breeze through the methods for this project. 20 professional opera singers were recruited to sing 2 minutes worth of tasks into a period wax cylinder phonograph and a flat response omnidirectional microphone at the same time. The cylinders were played 10 times prior to digitization to simulate wear, and the cylinder recordings were then digitized using an archaeophone. 3 tasks were analyzed for this part of the project.
steady state singing during a messa di voce task, in context singing using a phrase from Caro mio ben, and a female chest voice task for AFAB participants. 4 test signals were also used to analyze different aspects of the signal in a more controlled way. The measurements analyzed for this study can be categorized into 2 groups, those that describe vibrato measurements of a signal, and those that describe the spectral characteristics of a signal. The results of this study show that vibrato rate is constant when recorded with a wax cylinder phonograph. However, vibrato extent was found to be on average 3 cents higher in wax cylinder recordings of the same singer, and that difference was statistically significant. This audio example is a tenor singing a messa di voce first with a flat response microphone and then onto a wax cylinder. This figure shows the difference between what a flat response microphone captures and what the wax cylinder phonograph system captures with no wear. The black area shows us the frequency information that's deleted or simply not captured by the wax cylinder phonograph. It shows us the information that's lost. The most pertinent information from this chart is that the wax cylinder system attenuates or dampens all frequency information above approximately 3 kHz. Interestingly, it also seems to reduce the sound intensity level of all frequencies below 440 Hz. And this characteristic of the technology means that any note below approximately G3 to A4, roughly the entirety of a bass baritone, or baritone's upper range, would not include the fundamental frequency. So what does this tell us? The study shows us that vibrato rate measurements pulled from digitized wax cylinder recordings can be viewed as accurate to the original singer. On the other hand, vibrato extent measurements are slightly higher than reality. Past studies overwhelmingly demonstrate that vibrato rate has decreased and vibrato extent has increased over the past century, and the results from this study would seem to suggest that those changes in vibrato are at the very least indicative of a stylistic change and potentially suggestive of a technical change over the past century. This study also confirms that brown wax cylinder phonographs have spectral limitations and inherently distort recorded voices. However, future research should continue by analyzing our perception of these types of recordings. It should also use the results from this analysis of the recording technology to compare modern and historical recordings of singers. Thank you for viewing this poster presentation. Again, please feel free to scan that QR code to learn more about this project and to hear more recordings. Enjoy the rest of NATS 2020.
Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Hoch, and I am pleased to present our poster session for the 2020 NATS conference in Knoxville, which is now being held online. Our study is called Physiologic Variables as Correlates to Tone Color in Classically Trained Undergraduate Sopranos, a Pilot Study. And the 4 authors are myself, Mary J. Sandage and Grace Cutchin, we're all from Auburn University, and Kenneth W. Bozeman, who is emeritus at Lawrence University. Our research was guided by several questions. First of all, do physical parameters such as height, weight, and BMI correlate to perceived aural aspects of a singer's tone quality, including color and flexibility? Are there further correlations to objective measurements of voice range profile, laryngodiacokinetic rate, and forced vital capacity? Based on these correlations, is objective data useful information for the pedagogues? What are the implications for applied studio singing teachers? And we had 5 hypotheses when we started out the study. The first hypothesis was that there would be a positive correlation between higher measures of BMI and FVC with determinations of heavier, darker, and dramatic tone color. Our second hypothesis was that there would be a negative correlation between BMI and vocal flexibility. And our third hypothesis would be that there would be a positive correlation between faster LDDK rate and higher flexibility. Our fourth hypothesis was that there would be a positive correlation between lighter tone quality and higher flexibility. And our final hypothesis was that lower decibel SPL sound level information from the VRP would correlate to lighter tone color. Our methods were both subjective and objective. we had the singers all record a prescribed set of vocalizes, and then Ken Bozeman's subjective on a perceptual level, the different qualities of their voices, with the identities of the singers concealed, of course. The objective measurements include a voice range profile that each singer made, LDDK, forced vital capacity, and body mass index. And the specific equipment we used can be seen if you pause this video, or it can also be downloaded on the poster at the QR code at the end of this presentation. Mary and Grace collected the information from the singers, took the measurements, and observed the correlation. And our conclusion was that this pilot study indicates very little correlation between certain physical parameters of singers and tone quality and flexibility. Further study is needed with a larger participant sample. In addition, there would need to be some minor improvements in the way that some of the outcome measures are presented graphically. Future efforts should standardize the flexibility exercise used and recruit singers from as many different singing teachers as possible. And please take a moment to download our poster itself, where you can see all of the information and the data that we collected. And if there's any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
As a choral director and music teacher educator, I've used and taught semi-occluded vocal tract exercises to make my choirs and my students' choirs sound better in vocally efficient ways. These exercises, including lip and tongue trills, humming, and more recently, voicing through a straw or a tube, straw phonation, all include a narrowing and sometimes a lengthening of the vocal tract above the vocal folds. Researchers have found that heightened interaction between the glottis and supraglottal tract may reduce the breath pressure needed to initiate and sustain phonation. Subsequent voicing may feel less effortful, which may be related to the reduced neck muscle activity found in one study. At the same time, acoustic output seems to increase or remain consistent, with some vocologists referring to this as vocal economy. As I first looked into this topic, I found research with individual speakers and singers. But there's a body of literature that indicates that choral and individual singing are two related but distinct endeavors. Choristers stand in group formation, which affects their ability to hear their own voice in relation to others. There's also evidence that both amateur and professional singers may use less upper frequency acoustic energy and more fundamental frequency and first formant energy at many dynamics, which some listeners appear to favor. These possible differences led me to investigate straw phonation specifically in choirs. In 5 research studies, my colleagues and I worked with 9 treble, barbershop, and SATB choirs comprised of primarily high school singers, university students, or adult community members. Our singers were 15 to 94 years old. In each study, the choir sang a memorized piece, took part in a 4 to 5 minute straw phonation protocol, and then sang the piece again. The protocol was based on the NCVS YouTube video led by Dr. Ingo Tietze, which you can find along with other references in the QR code on the PowerPoint slides in this video. The protocol involved a series of vocal glides up and down, glides with a pulse, they call them accents, and voicing a portion of the Star Spangled Banner through the straw. The straw in each case was between 2.5 and 3 millimeters in diameter and around 13 centimeters long. We performed acoustic analyses and asked for singers to report their experiences to tease out any differences evoked by the straw protocol. We analyzed the choir's sound with long-term average spectrum, which is a rough estimate of choral timbre between 0 and 10 kilohertz. Pictured here are the pre- and post-test results for a community barbershop ensemble who used the straw protocol after 30 minutes of rehearsal, pre-test in the red and post-test in the black. The ensemble sang with 1 decibel average increase across the spectrum after the straw protocols. In 4 of our 5 studies, the choir sang with statistically significantly more acoustic energy after the protocols. The differences were the highest, around 3 decibels, when the choir used a straw protocol as a standalone warm-up at the beginning of the rehearsal, rather than as part of warm-up or in the middle of a rehearsal. Notably, in one study with 2 matched treble choirs, the straw group displayed a full decibel increase more than a group that performed the protocol on an ah vowel rather than through the straw. In addition, these results tended to be consistent across the spectrum. They were mostly consistent boosts in various regions, particularly between 2 to 4 kHz, which is the area in which the ear is most sensitive, and approximately the area of the singer's formant cluster. More than 260 singers in 3 of these studies reported when they believed the choir sounded better and when they individually sang most efficiently, before or after the straw. Nearly 95% believed the choir sounded better after the protocols, and nearly 88% thought their own vocal production was most efficient after using the straw. These results were particularly robust in ensembles in which the straw protocol was a standalone warm-up. Taken together, these results may indicate that choristers enjoy some of the same benefits that solo singers experience when using straw phonation. Thank you.
True bass voices are rare in the singing world. Young beginning basses and their teachers face a unique challenge: finding song repertoire that is fun and appropriately challenging, that suits the range and comfortable tessitura of this voice type. This challenge is compounded by the fact that the most abundantly available and well-known song literature for young singers is often compiled in anthologies listed as baritone/bass. Of course, there is no indication in these publications about which songs are for which voice type, leading to a good deal of confusion from student singers and voice teachers. The goal of this research is twofold. Review existing song anthologies that include repertoire for basses and baritones to identify which songs are the most appropriate for basses. Create a curated list that includes the range, tessitura, musical characteristics, and pedagogical tips for each song. Search for additional repertoire that would be well suited for young basses and provide a database of these songs as a resource for young basses and their voice teachers. All of this information has been published to the website songsforbass.com to be used as a free resource for young singers and their voice teachers. At this stage of the project, only English language songs have been included. It is the hope of the author to continue this project to include additional languages. One of the inspirations for this project is the work of Alan J. Ord. His text and song anthology, Songs for Beginning Bass Voice, is a highly recommended resource published by Scarecrow Press. In it, he provides a primer on the bass voice and offers some of the following tips for recognizing the young bass voice. Easy low notes, E2, D2, or even lower, are often strong and even if undeveloped. Upper notes are a struggle or non-existent. The voice may break into falsetto as low as A3. A low speaking voice, pitched around D2 through G2, even when well modulated, not due to poor speaking habits such as vocal fry. Usually dark in color and heavy in texture, especially in the low range. Color often thins as the voice ascends in pitch. In my own experience with young basses, I have noticed the following behaviors that can mask a bass voice. Habitual high larynx vocal production in both speech and singing. Until the singer learns to release the larynx upon inhalation, the natural low voice will not emerge. A disconnect between the speaking and singing voices, often a low, easy speaking voice paired with a tight, higher-pitched singing voice. Imitation of singers from popular music that frequently use falsetto and emphasize high-range singing. It is rare to hear a low male voice in this style of contemporary music, much as it is rare to hear female pop singers use their full upper range with a head-dominant production. Here is a quick tour of the website. From the home page, if we select songs from existing anthologies, we will find the volumes compiled by Joan Fry-Boytum, arranged from easy to more moderate levels. For each text, a table is shown that lists the songs that are appropriate for young basses. The table includes title, composer, range, and tessitura. Each song has a description that includes musical and technical challenges and some pedagogical advice for approaching the song with a student. If we go to published songs not in anthologies, we will find the database that was compiled from library research that lists songs in English that are useful for young basses and are published but less widely available. There are currently 45 songs listed, which may be filtered by range, tessitura, British or American song, musical challenge level, and technical challenge level. Entries also include title, composer, text source, publication information, and a brief description of the song's characteristics. You can also scan through the entries in order by composer last name. Thank you for the opportunity to share this work, and I look forward to any questions during the Zoom meetings and the conference.
Hi, my name is Heidi Moss Erickson, and my poster will explore the resonance effect of the zygomatic lift. Is it an emotional affect or direct physiology? And of course, this idea has permeated both historical and contemporary vocal pedagogy, starting in 1723 and working all the way up to the present day. Even if you Google it, you will find lots of information that correlates these two things. So my question is, why? Well, of course it works, so that's why it's been used all these years. However, I wanted to ask the question, what happens when it doesn't work? And I was forced to address this question when I came down with a damaged 7th cranial nerve, which completely knocked out my zygomaticus on one side. The first part was complete death, where I had zero function, but then eventually the nerves regrew, and instead of innervating the zygomaticus muscle, those nerves innervated my orbicularis, which means I squint when my brain sends a signal to smile. However, without any zygomatic engagement, I was still able to obtain the desired resonance balance. And this had me realize that correlation of this event does not mean causation. And I was fortunate to work with Richard Miller at Oberlin, who discussed with me at length all of these ideas. And in a private correspondence, he wrote, and I quote, "I must be frank and say that I know of no hard science that deals with that topic. Your experience does give pause to an old pedagogic saw." So he himself was conflicted about this idea, and it showed me that even ideas change and texts are mere snapshots in time. So when we read these old textbooks, we have to know that their ideas could change as well. So I wondered if this was really an alternate physical mode, or are there other forces at play? Neuroscience does give us some insight, and the past decade has given us a lot of new information. For example, humans associate positive emotions with higher frequencies regardless of your linguistic origin. Mood is linked to vowel type, and the physical act of smiling can induce a positive mood de novo. So I thought about a feedback loop that is all interconnected, whereby a smile can generate a happy mood, which then gives our brain correlations to higher frequencies, and these are all interconnected. And there's a chicken and the egg phenomenon to this. We don't know where it can originate, but I believe it can originate from any of those. And thus, so I went about to design some experiments, first in a non-vocal setting with a bass trombone winter term project at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, where we studied some of these things of happy and sad emotions. And we found that there were some both temporal and acoustic differences. So happy correlated to the higher harmonics, just as the neuroscience predicted. Interestingly, the third of a major scale also imparted higher harmonics that were amplified regardless of the emotional directive as compared to minor. So in studying this in the voice, I first reviewed the literature, and I discovered that there were no anatomical links between the zygomatic musculature and the soft palate or any other vocal tract elements. Experiments were also not conducted with adequate controls or N numbers, so that made me want to think about better designs to address some of those controls. The first was control for molar distance in the jaw to stabilize the articulators with 2 different size sticks. And then, of course, going through the similar emotional intentions as the trombone. And then in terms of facial configurations, 0 contraction, a smile, and then most importantly, a zygomaticus lift without contraction that could be confirmed with EMG. So there is a way to lift and isolate the zygomatic muscle and show that it is not contracting to replicate a position of a lift without actual muscle contraction. And the preliminary results, I'm doing this all on my own, so I would love to do more experiments and get some funding to have high-end numbers and really do this in detail. But it showed that, interestingly, the smile, again, with a happy concept, had higher harmonics amplified when the fundamental was controlled for and equal across experiments. 2 to 4K, it was amplified. And then interestingly, also when it was just physically lifted without a contraction, again, the happy intention could amplify those frequencies. So further experiments are definitely necessary, but this gave me some interesting insight to this conundrum. Here are the QR codes if you'd like to look further. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for watching this video. I hope during these trying times that you and your loved ones are and continue to remain healthy and safe. My name is Paul Patinka, and this poster presentation details the diversity analysis of the 2017-2018 NATS National Student Audition entries. This research was conducted in an effort to better understand how the identities of the composers whose music we sing relates to our own personal identities and the demographic identities of the communities in which we live.
The 2017-2018 audition year was the first year that the entire NATS community used an online registration system for chapter and regional auditions. It provides the first collective data pool with a representative sample of what is being taught in the broader voice community. In 2019, I spent roughly 300 hours combing through the data, correcting errors in spelling and entry, and standardizing musical titles and composer names to compile a condensed list of all the pieces in the data set. This level of data analysis serves to ask questions of generally assumed trends in repertoire selection, as well as to fundamentally understand what we, as a community of voice teachers, are selecting as the best repertoire for our students' voices. Having such a representative sample of the data is useful not only because it allows us to see whether our own repertoire choices fit the broader choices being made across the country, but also what narrative structures we are representing as a whole. There's a great deal of research showing that students who can clearly see themselves as a part of an institutional structure or experience are far more likely to enter that field and be successful within it. Women in technology, people of color in higher education, and openly queer individuals showing positively in the media are all clear examples of this. It does not seem like a far cognitive leap to think that the same principles would apply to success in music and, specifically, singing. While data on faculty and professional performer demographics is another study in and of itself, I specifically looked at the composer demographics of this repertoire. Considering the central role that composers play in the music they create and our understanding of their music, it seemed fitting to evaluate the composer's identifying features to the best of our collective historical knowledge of them. This information was then compared to the demographic features of NASM accredited schools and the broader US population to see how the three groups compare. Current Census Bureau data, which is not significantly different from the 2017-2018 academic year, showed that the population is almost evenly split between male and female, and almost 28% of the population is considered to be a person of color or non-white. While impossible to have a truly accurate number, most polls and groups estimate the queer population to hover around the 5% mark, with some extending up to 10%, depending on the qualifiers used in data collection and where people are considered to fall on the spectrum of human sexuality. Data collected by the National Association of Schools of Music about student populations and their accredited and reporting institution appears to be similar, with an almost 10% increase in persons of color to 37%. Again, while exact numbers of queer persons in these institutions is difficult to ascertain, it seems most likely that this number also hovers around the same mark as the general population. Finally, when looking at the demographic information of the composers sung for the NSA auditions, we see that none of the factors align with the broader population and NASM institutions. To be clear, not every piece sung at the NSA auditions comes from an NASM institution, but these figures are the largest data set obtainable in the present moment. Repertoire choices remain one of the most important decisions a teacher makes with their student. The right repertoire for the right student at the right time is crucial to the student's success. However, identities in our lives, such as gender, sex, sexual orientation, race, and ethnicity, are frequently left out of the repertoire decision. Fundamentally, it does not appear that these factors are being considered as part of the repertoire selection process. I certainly have not always considered them when choosing repertoire for my own students. It is also worthwhile to note that this music is largely being taught and sung by classical-oriented musicians and might look very different if the focus was shifted toward popular music competitions. While there is no current evaluation of how these factors influence students' success in the vocal world, there is certainly a need for future research to better understand how the demographic choices of the repertoire we consider to be standard are impacting the faces of classically sung vocal music. Thank you for watching. For more information, please follow this QR code to the summary article published in Manternach.
Hello, my name is Brianna Smith. Dr. Kevin Hanrahan and I conducted research on predictive timbres based on format analysis of singers to examine the effect of texts on vocal production. The purpose of this study was to determine the effect of the vowel-pitch relationship on predicted and perceived timbres. We also sought to further describe the timbres whoop, yell, close, and open based on Bozeman's definitions in his 2013 Practical Vocal Acoustics, Pedagogic Applications for Teachers and Singers. 4 male and 3 female singing participants were recorded singing an excerpt in 2 different keys and completed a survey about their perceptions. Next, an expert panel of 7 singers and voice teachers listened to the recordings and completed a survey describing their perceptions and defining timbral qualities. Both qualitative and quantitative data analyses were conducted to determine if vowel modification was necessary within the excerpt to produce a desirable timbre. To determine the timbre, we first used Bozeman's definitions and then used the Pratt format analysis function. We also used a series of Fry trials to predict where an individual's formants may lie, but these were inconclusive. We compared these timbre predictions with the average perceptual rating of the panel participants' surveys. We compared the panel group average for the excerpt recordings to the analyzed sung timbres. As a group, the listeners correctly identified the timbres in 43% of the tracks. Interestingly, however, they correctly identified the timbres in 75% of the male tracks, with statistical significance indicated by the asterisks. On the other hand, the panel did not correctly identify any of the female tracks. Next, we determined if the singers' perceptions aligned with the predicted, analyzed, and perceived timbres. This table shows the panel perceived timbres of each track in comparison to the singers' perceptions. For the male singers, some indicated using a louder dynamic, and one indicated using more breath energy, but none indicated modifying the vowel. In one singer, however, it appears that the panel may have been influenced by his modifications in production quality, as they perceived the switch to head voice as producing a close timbre, which aligned with the Pratt and analyzed sung timbre. For the female singers, both our predictions based on Bozeman's definitions and the analyzed sung data indicated that 100% of the female singers were in whoop. Unfortunately, the panel did not correctly identify any of the female excerpts. However, the female singers who indicated they modified the vowel to be more forward or more open were perceived by the panel as being in a yell timbre, or the panel was split between close and yell. Perhaps the singers' modifications influenced the panel in this way. We correctly predicted the singers' timbres 92.9% of the time. The panel was correct only 43% of the time and did not correctly label any of the female recordings. We recognize that with higher voices, there is an increased chance for errors in predicting the anticipated timbre because the space between harmonic frequencies is greater. In terms of qualitative comments, the panel was successful in describing the one male excerpt in close, with comments including falsetto sound void of vibrato and no body to the sound makes this timbre hollow. Compare this to the descriptors for one of the male excerpts correctly identified as yell timbre. However, for the incorrectly identified excerpts, Qualitative comments likewise varied among panel listeners, such as in this final example, where 3 different panel members said a bit too bright, sound slightly swallowed, warm, somewhat balanced sound, and rounded at top end yet still cutting. These conflicting or often vague descriptors present issues for the voice community and students who receive such feedback. In conclusion, we cannot conclusively say that format analysis of singers can accurately predict a timbre that will be perceived by listeners, but there is evidence to suggest it may be beneficial to consider the vowel-pitch relationship in repertoire when working with a male singer to determine if there is a formant-harmonic interaction that is creating a certain timbre. Further research is needed on the topic, but this could help enhance the selection and teaching of male repertoire in the vocal studio. Further study could focus on the perception of timbre and the language used to describe it, as well as what makes a timbre pleasing. Thank you so much for listening.